Hello, my name is Jennifer Bester. My colleagues and I are presenting on behalf of the Leagues of Women Voters for San Mateo County. I will be presenting the pros and cons for State Ballot Measure 15. Proposition 15 is a constitutional amendment put on the ballot by voter initiative. Proposition 15 requires commercial and industrial real property to be taxed based on current market value instead of purchase price. It is expected to increase funding for public schools and community colleges, as well as local governments in California. How did this start? In the mid-1970s, property values increased rapidly each year. Taxation of each property was based on its current market value. Each local government entity, the city, the school district, the fire district, levied its own percentage tax on this value. In that period of rapid inflation, individual property tax bills increased quickly. Owners, especially retired homeowners on fixed incomes, were looking for a way to protect themselves against escalating, unaffordable property taxes. Proposition 13 was passed in 1978. It limited the taxation value of properties to their acquisition value plus an annual inflation factor, no greater than 2% a year. Since property values have increased faster than 2% a year for most of the past 40 years, long-term property holders pay significantly less than recent buyers for equivalent properties. Property tax is also levied on business equipment and fixtures. Statewide, about $65 billion is collected in property tax. Of that, about 1/5 is collected on 600,000 commercial and industrial properties. Statewide, 60% of all property tax paid goes to cities, special districts, county governments, and redevelopment debt. Educational entities receive about 40%. Here in San Mateo County, less is allocated to local governments and more to educational entities. Currently, about $800 million is spent statewide administering property tax assessment and collection. Let me first point out that Proposition 15 does not affect residential property. It would separate commercial and industrial properties from all other properties. It would change their taxation basis and assessment regulations. Single-family residences and apartments would not be affected, nor would small commercial property owners or agricultural land. Starting in January 2022, commercial and industrial properties would be taxed on their current market value, with reassessment to market at least every 3 years for properties worth over $3 million. Reassessment of certain small business occupied properties would be delayed until 2025. All businesses in California would also get a new tax break. They would be able to exempt up to $500,000 of equipment and fixtures from the separate 1% business personal property tax. Certain small businesses could exempt more. How will the money that's generated be distributed? A new statewide educational fund would be created. Any new revenue allocated to an educational entity would go into the new statewide educational fund. Note that every county is different. Some allocate more to education, others less. In San Mateo, after all redevelopment obligations have been met, over 62% of new revenues will be allocated to the new statewide fund. Statewide, this contribution is estimated closer to 40%. Then, money coming out of the statewide educational fund would be allocated primarily based on headcount. However, schools whose local property tax exceeds the state's funding formula will receive less, though a minimum of $100 per student. Many districts in San Mateo County have recently become property tax funded districts due to property tax growth. Those that just qualify to be property tax funded will receive more than $100 per student. Right now, for example, that would include Cabrillo, Redwood City Elementary, and Jefferson High. Overall, due to high levels of property tax, San Mateo County's educational institutions will receive somewhat less than other counties. The remaining new revenue within each county would be distributed to local government entities based on their existing allocations. On average, this is 60% statewide, though it varies greatly. At full implementation in 2025, the Legislative Analyst's Office estimates $8 to $12.5 billion of new revenue, with several hundred million a year of new administrative costs. Altogether, they forecast between $6.5 and $11.5 billion of net new revenue from this measure. 60% statewide should go to local city, county, and service governments. The 40% allocation to education would represent roughly a 4 to 7% supplement to the basic funding formula for state-funded schools. $100 would represent roughly a 1.2% supplement for our property tax-funded schools. Property tax-funded schools will receive new revenue, though they may see an offsetting loss of existing business personal property tax. The Legislative Analyst's Office also emphasizes that the value of commercial property can change a lot from year to year, so this revenue could also change a lot from year to year. Not all entities would be guaranteed new money. The Legislative Analyst's Office indicates the rural areas may actually end up losing money. Supporters say that Proposition 15 provides billions in new revenue for our communities and schools. They say that 10% of the wealthiest businesses will provide more than 90% of the revenue. They say that it gives tax breaks to small businesses to help our economy grow. And they say that it keeps Proposition 13's protection for homeowners, renters, and farms. Opponents say that Proposition 15 would trigger the largest property tax increase in California's history. They say that additional costs will ultimately raise prices for consumers. They say it will make it harder for people to start small businesses. And they say it will require huge costs to administer. This is a controversial measure that changes the state constitution. We've attempted to capture both sides' arguments. We hope the numbers and information we've presented here provide some local perspective. Supplement this information with other trusted sources. Proponents listed here have raised over $36 million in support of this proposition. Opponents also listed here have raised over $21 million in opposition. Proposition 15, yes or no? A yes vote supports a different market value-based property valuation system for commercial properties. Centralized, statewide distribution of the school and community college share of new revenue. A significant change in county assessor and appeals workload. A no vote opposes the proposition's removal of Proposition 13 protections for commercial and industrial properties.